Greetings, dear audience. Before we dive into today's tale, we invite you to share your location in the comments below. And remember to show your support by liking and subscribing. For the past 6 months, Ben had been navigating a life that seemed strange and devoid of meaning. His union with Kathy, once brimming with joy and mirth, had transformed into a mere shadow of its former self. Once, her laughter had the power to elevate his mood on the toughest days. And her touch provided the comfort of knowing he was cherished. Now, those moments linger only as distant echoes. Kathy had become increasingly distant, her behavior shifting in ways that Ben could no longer overlook. Their dialogues had reduced to trivial exchanges concerning everyday matters. The groceries, the news, the bills, and the closeness they once experienced, both in heart and body, had faded away entirely. Each effort Ben put forth to close the widening gap between them was met with apathy or blatant dismissal. He still recalled the last time he attempted to reach out to her, his hand softly resting on hers as they enjoyed a movie together. She swiftly distanced herself, offering a vague excuse about feeling fatigued. That night, as Ben lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, he came to the unsettling realization that he couldn't remember the last time Kathy had willingly reached out to him. Recollections of the initial moments of their union echoed in his thoughts, both poignant and lingering. In those days, she was his entire world, his closest companion, trusted confidant, and genuine partner. They had exchanged aspirations, joy, and visions for what was to come. Yet now, it seemed she had closed him off entirely, building an impenetrable barrier between them. The most challenging aspect was the unpredictability. Ben found himself puzzled by the shifts that had occurred and the reasons behind them. Had he committed an error? Or had he neglected to accomplish something? He devoted endless hours to revisiting memories, probing for the moment their joy started to fray. Yet Kathy remained silent. Each time he inquired about her troubles, she brushed him off with a terse response, claiming that all was well. Her tone cut through the air, her gaze turned away, as if she found it impossible to meet his eyes any longer. The pain went beyond mere silence. The sense that Kathy had lost interest was becoming increasingly palpable. The warmth she once offered without hesitation had disappeared, leaving Ben with a profound sense of abandonment and solitude. He explored every avenue to rekindle the flame they had once known, crafting enchanting evenings, delighting her with thoughtful surprises, and even proposing they seek guidance together. Yet, every attempt was confronted with the identical justifications. Overwhelmed, frazzled, exhausted, after months of effort, Ben was beginning to lose faith that there was any hope remaining for them. He had arrived at his limit. The stillness, the lingering uncertainties, and the growing chasm between them had turned intolerable. He could no longer maintain the facade that everything was all right. This evening, he decided to face the tension directly. It's time to confront the matter head-on. No longer will we sweep things under the rug. He sought the truth, regardless of the potential chaos it might bring. After dinner, he discovered Kathy in the living room, mindlessly scrolling through her phone, her expression vacant and her attention drifting away. For a moment, Ben paused, the burden of uncertainty weighing down on him. Yet, gathering all the bravery within him, he moved ahead. "Kathy," Ben started. His voice was steady, yet carried a hint of fatigue. It was time for a conversation. She hardly lifted her eyes from her device. "Is it possible to hold off for a moment?" "Ben, I'm currently engaged in a task." "No, it can't," he replied, stepping forward to position himself in front of her. "I can no longer endure this existence, filled with uncertainty about what transpired between us. What became of you?" Kathy sighed, setting her phone aside, her posture still defensive with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I need to know what's going on," she said. "What is this regarding now?" Ben inhaled deeply, striving to maintain control over his feelings. "It concerns us," reflecting on the distance that has grown between us over the past 6 months. "You've closed me off, both in heart and presence, as if we are mere acquaintances sharing the same space. I seek to understand the reason behind this." Her expression turned steely as she shook her head in rejection. "I have no idea what you're referring to," she replied with a cutting tone. "You're analyzing every little detail too much." Ben's irritation reached a boiling point. "Contemplating too much?" "Kathy, We hardly even make contact anymore. Each time I attempt to reach out, you distance yourself. You choose not to engage with me. It feels as though I'm an unwelcome presence in your world. I am your husband. Shouldn't I be given an explanation? Kathy narrowed her eyes, her voice eerily composed. Ben, my body is my choice, she stated calmly, and generally speaking, you ought to seek permission before considering any physical contact with me. I navigate my existence according to my own principles, and I refuse to let anyone infringe upon my limits. Her words struck Ben with the force of a physical blow. He gazed at her, utterly astonished. Excuse me? He managed to utter, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Kathy, this is something fresh. This isn't who you are. Over the past 6 months, it feels as though you've transformed into a different person. Are you truly listening to your own words? This is all utterly perplexing. Kathy's expression became steely, her voice taking on a chilling tone. I was once so naive, she snapped. I allowed your influence to shape me, permitted your control over my choices. But I've gained wisdom since then. A woman is entitled to greater rights than a man, and it is essential that you honor my choices and fulfill my requests. Ben sensed a profound change in the very foundation of his reality. The woman he adored, the woman he believed he understood, now appeared as a stranger, uttering phrases that felt foreign and unknown. Kathy, he uttered, his voice quaking with incredulity. What do you mean? I have always treated you with respect. I have consistently offered you freedom and made sacrifices for your sake. Have you been exploring some thought-provoking feminist literature? Her eyes sparkled with fury. There it is, she retorted. You're quick to judge, attempting to undermine me, portraying me as unreasonable, and don't assume I'm oblivious to the true nature of this situation. You're upset because I no longer share a bed with you. All that seems to matter to men like you is your desire. Ben pressed his palms against his forehead, grappling with the sheer ridiculousness of her claims. Frustration intertwined with despair as he started to question whether there was anything worth saving in their marriage. As he finally turned his gaze toward her, his face revealed a blend of anguish and frustration. All right, Kathy, he replied slowly, his voice laden with acceptance. If that's the perspective you're taking, then here's my reply. My wallet reflects my decisions. My money represents my decisions. All right, here's the situation. You'll secure a full-time position and contribute half towards our expenses. How's that for honoring decisions? Kathy's face twisted in fury. That's manipulation, she exclaimed, her voice escalating. Ben, your behavior is reminiscent of an abuser. I anticipated that you would turn to manipulation and attempt to dominate my feelings. Influence? Ben retorted, raising his hands in astonishment. Kathy, I find myself questioning who you have become. When did you do that? When did you find yourself in such a state? Kathy sprang up, shaking with rage. This is precisely why I've transformed, she snapped. Because individuals like you believe they can manipulate women into compliance. Ben rose to his feet, his frustration reaching a breaking point. Manipulate you? For months, I've been working to salvage this marriage, seeking to understand the issues at hand and striving to mend them. While you have only pushed me away and treated me as if I were the adversary. A heavy silence enveloped the room, their breaths coming in sharp gasps as their fury clashed like thunderous waves. Ben experienced a profound, all-consuming sorrow wash over him, more intense than anything he had encountered previously. This had ceased to be a marriage, it had transformed into a battlefield. He averted his gaze, unable to face her. For the first time, the idea of divorce didn't evoke a sense of defeat, instead. It emerged as a potential escape. The following morning, following the intense clash, Ben sat in his car outside a lawyer's office, gazing at the sign for White and Associates. His stomach twisted in knots as he grappled with the gravity of his impending decision. He was not one to act impulsively, yet the thought of enduring a lifetime in a cold, antagonistic marriage was simply intolerable. The attorney, a middle-aged gentleman named Trevor White, welcomed Ben with a strong handshake and an air of calm professionalism. In the following hour, Ben unfolded his predicament, describing Kathy's progressively unpredictable actions, her emotional and physical detachment, and the peculiar notions that had taken the place of substantial discussions. Trevor absorbed every word, occasionally making notes, all while maintaining a respectful silence. As Ben wrapped up, Trevor reclined in his chair, thoughtfully adjusting his glasses. He remarked that it was a challenging predicament. His tone is deliberate, yet it's not entirely unusual. Notable shifts in personality and an unwillingness to participate may occasionally indicate outside factors at play. She might be delving into a fresh perspective, or maybe it's something more intimate. Ben's brow furrowed, a tightness coiling in his gut. Are you implying that there could be another person involved? Trevor gave a slight shrug. That's one option to consider. Yet it's crucial to avoid making hasty judgments. Before jumping to conclusions, let's concentrate on actionable measures. There are choices available to you. We can begin crafting the divorce papers now, or you may choose to take some time to observe the situation. Acquiring a deeper insight into the situation could provide you with clarity and potentially a strategic edge should this progress to legal proceedings. Ben nodded thoughtfully, taking in the counsel. Let's pause the paperwork for the time being. I must observe how events develop. That evening, back at home, Ben sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, carefully tallying their monthly expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, and more. Upon calculating the total, he split the amount into 2 equal parts. His portion was already accounted for by his income, yet he meticulously noted the precise amount Kathy would need to contribute to fulfill her share. Next, Ben took a small wooden box from the closet and set it out on the kitchen counter for all to see. The gesture, though straightforward, conveyed a distinct message. Later that evening, as Kathy entered the kitchen, she found Ben seated at the table, waiting, with his notebook in hand. He spoke with a steady voice. Kathy, this outlines all our monthly expenses. I have fulfilled my part. The box awaits your valuable input. Kathy halted, her gaze sharpening with suspicion. What is the meaning of this? It signifies, Ben responded calmly, that you've articulated your wish for autonomy and for your limits to be acknowledged. I'm paying tribute to that. If we are truly partners in this marriage, then we must equally share the responsibilities that come with managing our home. Kathy's face burned with fury, her lips forming a tight, thin line. This is a form of influence. She broke. You're attempting to penalize me for not conforming to the image of a wife you desire. No, Kathy, Ben said, his voice calm yet resolute. I honor your decisions. However, freedom carries with it a sense of duty. For years, I have shouldered the financial responsibilities of this family. If our dynamic is set to evolve, then our arrangement must adapt accordingly. Her eyes ignited with fury, and she retorted sharply, I understand that my job doesn't offer the same financial rewards as yours. This situation is unjust. Perhaps it's time to reconsider that. Ben replied with a steady demeanor. He motioned toward the box. Please ensure your contribution is submitted by the end of the month. Kathy burst out of the kitchen, grumbling quietly about deceit and emotional turmoil. Ben chose not to follow her. Instead, he reclined in his chair, experiencing an unusual sense of disconnection. He felt no anger now, only exhaustion. In the weeks that ensued, Ben observed Kathy intently. At first glance, she seemed to be managing just fine. However, it was evident that she had no desire to implement significant alterations. She often expressed her frustrations regarding Ben's excessive demands, showed no initiative to seek a more suitable job, and persisted in her part-time role at her previous workplace. She often found herself lost in the endless scroll of social media or engaged in phone conversations, rarely making an effort to play a more active role in the household. As the bills came in, the wooden box remained strikingly overlooked. Ben held back from confronting her immediately. Instead, he watched her actions silently, akin to a researcher studying a phenomenon. What captivated him most was the underlying bitterness she appeared to harbor. Kathy had always held her head high, yet, that pride had transformed into a shadowy force, an obstinate denial to entertain the notion that she could hold any accountability for the widening chasm between them. Whenever Ben raised even the slightest concerns, she would sidestep the issue by labeling him as controlling or dismissive. With the month drawing to a close, the box stayed devoid of contents. Ben felt a familiar ache. Though he had expected it, the absence of effort still cut deep. He had wished, even if just a little, that Kathy would perceive the situation as a chance to demonstrate her dedication to their partnership. What he encountered was nothing but defiance and an unwillingness to confront the truths of their shared existence. As the bills arrived, Ben found himself once more at the kitchen table, the notebook and the pristine wooden box laid out before him. He feared the impending conversation that loomed ahead. It would undoubtedly spark yet another confrontation. Yet he was resolute in his decision. Kathy's actions in the last month had only strengthened his determination to embrace her newfound principles. She had to confront the responsibilities that accompanied them. "Kathy, Ben is calling from the kitchen." His tone was deliberate. "Could you please come here for a moment?" Moments later, she stood in the doorway, arms crossed and a deep scowl carved into her features. "What is it at this moment?" Ben pointed to the wooden box resting on the counter. "The bills are due today. Yet the box remains empty. Failure to make payment will result in late fees and penalties." Her frown deepened, and the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. "I'm aware of that," she retorted. "Please stop bothering me." "So, what's causing the hold-up?" Ben inquired, his tone steady yet resolute. "We had a mutual understanding that you would take care of your portion." "I have managed my portion. Now is the moment for you to take charge of your responsibilities." That was all it needed to ignite her rage. Her voice escalated as she retorted. "Incredible, Ben. You are meant to be my husband. A true partner takes on the financial responsibilities rather than shifting them onto his spouse." "This is disappointing," Ben retorted. "A true partner would fulfill her responsibilities without voicing concerns about limits and approvals. You initiated this chaos, and if you seek change, begin by taking actions that will earn my respect. For years, I bore the financial burden silently, without a word of discontent. You've distanced yourself from me, established new boundaries in our relationship, and made me feel as though I'm the source of the issues. Now, when the moment arrives to take action or remain silent, isn't this what you desired? Freedom, increased liberties." Her face flushed with color, and for a brief moment, it seemed she might strike out once more. Instead, she pivoted sharply and marched out, forcefully shutting the bedroom door behind her. From the kitchen, Ben could hear Kathy bustling about in the bedroom, rifling through drawers and shuffling papers. Her murmurs barely audible. Almost 30 minutes went by before she came back, gripping a small bundle of cash and a handful of coins. She approached and let it fall into the box with a sharp clatter, her expression a blend of anger and frustration. "There," she remarked with a sharp edge, her tone dripping with irony. "Is that what you were hoping for? That's all I possess, down to the very last cent." Ben looked at the box, then returned his gaze to her, his demeanor steady and inscrutable. "Thank you," he said softly, yet Kathy had more to say. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter, her voice cutting and filled with disdain. "I never thought I would end up with someone so selfish. You resemble all those self-centered, domineering individuals, consumed by his fixation on wealth and influence." Ben remained silent. He had come to realize that entering into a dispute would only exacerbate the situation. Instead, he reclined in his chair, observing her with an air of cool detachment. Her words hardly affected him any longer. What held significance now was her next move. Would she attempt to endure with the scant resources remaining to her? Would she finally muster the courage to seek a better job? Or would she finally seek his help despite all her defiance? No matter what decision she made, Ben was certain of one thing. This had ceased to be a collaboration. The morning air was invigorating as Ben lingered in the kitchen, savoring his coffee, his eyes drawn to the window. His phone lay on the counter next to him. He had reached out to Trevor earlier, ultimately confronting the choice he had been sidestepping for weeks. "Prepare the documents," he instructed, his tone firm yet tinged with a sense of inevitability. "It's time to part ways." "Okay," Trevor replied, his tone a blend of professionalism and empathy. "The documents will be prepared in a week." A week seemed to be just the perfect duration. It allowed Ben to watch Kathy and validate what he had long believed. Their union was irreparably broken. It also provided him with the opportunity to ready himself emotionally for the unavoidable clash. He intended to deliver the papers to her himself, not out of malice, but because he sought closure, to witness her response and ultimately dissolve the stifling tension that had enveloped their home. The week unfolded slowly, with each passing day revealing more about Kathy's behavior. To Ben's astonishment, she appeared to settle down. The furious outbursts and biting replies diminished, giving way to a calmer, more subdued demeanor. She continued to spend hours scrolling through her phone, remaining distant, yet the sharpness in her voice had dulled. Yet, Ben remained unable to dispel the feeling that something was brewing just out of sight. He observed the way her expression would constrict while she was texting, her fingers darting swiftly over the screen, her face fixed in focus. The tension emanated from her as she concentrated on the device, her lips forming a tight line. Whatever was unfolding, it was evident that finances, or the absence thereof, were at the heart of the matter. As the documents came together at last, Ben experienced a strange blend of relief and apprehension. He collected them from Trevor's office that afternoon, then devoted the remainder of the day to contemplating the situation. This marked the start of the conclusion. Seated at his desk, the envelope weighed down his lap, and he envisioned the evening's progression. He would patiently await Kathy's arrival, present her with the documents, and allow her to respond in her own way. It may bring discomfort, yet it would signify the conclusion of a chapter. As the evening unfolded, Kathy surprised Ben with an unexpected twist. She arrived late, nearly 2 hours beyond her typical schedule. Ben hardly looked up when she entered, yet there was something in her presence that caused him to hesitate. She appeared changed. She held herself with a more relaxed posture, her expression gentler. The lingering frustration that had enveloped her for months had dissipated. Instead, she gave him a gentle, hesitant smile. "Hi," she said, placing her bag on the ground, her voice unexpectedly soft. "Hi," Ben replied, observing her intently. She glided through the kitchen with a grace he hadn't witnessed in months, retrieving a teapot and rummaging through the cupboards for teabags. "I thought I might prepare some tea for us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has been some time since we last engaged in conversation." Ben lifted an eyebrow, curiosity ignited. "Would you like some tea?" "Indeed," she remarked, setting down 2 mugs on the table. "I discovered some treats in the pantry and thought it would be pleasant to take a moment to relax." She smiled once more, her brightness illuminating the moment, and Ben sensed a gentle easing of his defenses. This was not the Kathy he had known for the last 6 months. It felt like a sudden awakening, as if she had rediscovered the essence of the woman he had once vowed to love. He settled at the table, observing her as she poured the tea and artfully arranged the sweets on a delicate plate. "Thank you," he replied with a hint of hesitation, taking the mug she offered him. "This comes as a surprise." "I know," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "Lately, I've found myself deep in thought. Who we are, concerning all matters." Ben felt a sudden jolt in his chest. He felt the urge to inquire about her meaning, to seek clarity, yet he restrained himself. He lifted his cup, savoring the warmth of the tea, as he patiently awaited her explanation. Their dialogue began tentatively, filled with light exchanges about the children, the climate, and a neighbor's recent vehicle purchase. As the minutes ticked by, Kathy appeared to settle into the conversation, her voice becoming more inviting, tinged with a sense of nostalgia. Even so, Ben couldn't quite rid himself of the nagging sensation that something was amiss. Her abrupt change, the gentle inflection, everything seemed overly deliberate. Thoughts surged through his mind, each one vying for clarity. Had she uncovered his intentions? Was this a bid to salvage their union? Or was there a more profound motive at work that he had yet to comprehend? As the last sip of tea was taken, Ben found clarity in his choice. The divorce papers could be postponed until tomorrow. He required additional time to watch Kathy closely, to determine whether this was merely another ploy to control him. He was determined not to lower his defenses prematurely. While they tidied up side by side, Ben noticed Kathy out of the corner of his eye. She seemed serene, nearly satisfied, yet he detected the faint hints of unease. Her hands clutched the cloth with a tension that betrayed her thoughts as she wiped the counter, the rigidity in her jaw revealing her inner turmoil when she believed he wasn't watching. There was an unmistakable sense that something was amiss. The hour had come to retire for the night. Ben stepped into the softly illuminated living room, unfurling the bedding across the couch. For the past month and a half, this had become his routine. with the once shared bed now a mere echo of the past. The stillness of the house weighed down the atmosphere, a persistent echo of the gap that lay between him and Kathy. The gentle cascade of water from the shower created a strangely soothing atmosphere. However, when Kathy stepped out of the bathroom, her hair encased in a towel and her face glowing from a recent wash, Ben found himself taken aback. She smiled at him gently, her voice surprisingly inviting. "I was thinking, perhaps you could return to our bedroom tonight," she said, casually leaning against the doorway. "It has been some time since we last shared a bed." Ben blinked, taken aback by her abrupt change in demeanor. He hesitated, seeking clarity in her expression. What an odd twist of fate, he mused, his thoughts racing to catch up. After a moment, he was able to reply with both courtesy and conviction. "I find myself feeling quite fatigued, Kathy. A lengthy day lies before me." Her smile dimmed slightly, giving way to a reflective expression. "What a pity," she whispered, a hint of sorrow lacing her words. "Rest well, and should you reconsider, know that I'll be here, ready and waiting." She pivoted and strode off, leaving Ben rooted in place, engulfed in confusion and unease. The remainder of the night unfolded in a tense quietude, with Ben sprawled on the couch, his gaze fixed on the shadowy ceiling above. His mind repeatedly returned to that moment, filled with doubt and uncertainty. What is the reason for this moment? He pondered. Why, on the very day I intended to present her with the divorce papers, had she inexplicably altered her demeanor as if nothing had transpired? The change seemed intentional, akin to a strategic play in a game he hadn't known was underway. His curiosity tugged at him, drawing him further into the ambiguity she had woven. With the first light of dawn filtering through the curtains, Ben arrived at his decision. It's time to move forward with confidence, without any doubts lingering in the mind. The morning sunlight poured into the kitchen, casting a warm glow as he sat at the table, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in his hands. Next to him lay the envelope containing the divorce papers, a silent yet powerful testament to his unwavering resolve. He savored a deliberate sip of coffee, bracing himself for the dialogue that lay ahead. Kathy stepped in with a lightness in her footsteps, radiating brightness and cheerfulness. "Good morning, darling," she said to him with warmth. Her voice was sweet and warm. "Morning," Ben responded, maintaining a calm and steady tone. She filled her cup with tea and settled into her seat opposite him, her demeanor strikingly agreeable. Following a brief exchange of light conversation, her attitude changed ever so slightly. She stole a glance at him from the side, her voice wavering slightly. "You know, Ben," she started, her tone light and teasing. "This might come off as a bit bold, but I was curious if you could possibly lend me $150, just for a week? I assure you that I will repay you." Ben set his coffee cup down with deliberate care, his eyes narrowing as the realization struck him. There it stood, the warmth, the unexpected kindness. It was an essential element of her plan. Kathy was in need of funds, and she was embracing the persona of the devoted wife to secure them. He reclined in his chair, observing her with meticulous attention. $150, is it? Ben spoke with a serene demeanor, his eyes unwavering. "Well, Kathy, I have something even more exciting." Her eyes sparkled, and a soft laugh escaped her lips. "Improved? What, $200? $500? She teased, a soft laugh escaping her lips at her own jest. Ben extended his hand to the envelope, smoothly pushing it in her direction, his voice steady and composed. He responded with a straightforward reply. Kathy's laughter dwindled as she grasped the envelope, a look of bewilderment crossing her features. She opened it, and as her eyes scanned the divorce papers inside, her expression transformed, first into confusion, then into shock, and ultimately into a rising wave of panic. "Ben," she faltered, her voice quaking, "what is this all about?" "It is precisely what it appears to be," he stated, his tone unwavering. "Legal documents for dissolution of marriage. After much contemplation, I've realized that this marriage is beyond my ability to mend." Her hands trembled as she gazed at the documents. "Ben, this feels a bit abrupt. We cannot simply discard everything in this manner. We must make an effort. Our marriage can still be salvaged. I have the ability to transform." Ben shook his head, his determination unwavering. Kathy, that opportunity has passed. For months, I've been reflecting on where things went astray, attempting to mend it, striving to return us to our former selves. Yet you kept distancing yourself from me at every turn. You made me feel insignificant, as if I were an outsider in a place that should have been mine. Now, when you require something, you suddenly revert to being the affectionate partner once more. I can see it clearly. She leaned over the table, her voice rising in urgency. Ben, you just don't understand, she pleaded, her voice quivering. I've been navigating through quite a bit. I never intended to cause you pain. I simply require additional time to sort everything out. I kindly ask you to reconsider this action. Ben locked eyes with her, his gaze steady and his voice calm yet resolute. Kathy, I've taken considerable time to contemplate our marriage and the way you've treated me over the last few months. The unyielding strain, the subtle control. This situation isn't beneficial for either of us. We both deserve more than what we've been given. Her expression twisted, her gaze falling to the divorce papers as though she could make them vanish with sheer will. I don't want this, she whispered. I refuse to continue living this way. Ben stated with conviction. He rose from his seat, coffee mug in hand. Feel free to take as long as you require to review the documents. But my choice is conclusive. He turned and walked away, leaving her there, the envelope clutched firmly in her hands. The month of divorce proceedings marked the most challenging period in Ben's life. The legal struggles, the emotional turmoil, and Kathy's persistent efforts to mend things pushed him to the brink of his endurance. She wept, pleaded, and vowed to transform, striving to sway him to reconsider his choice and salvage their union. Yet Ben had already reached his conclusion. Too much had transpired. And there was no turning back. With Trevor White by his side, Ben found himself with a distinct advantage in the divorce proceedings. Trevor, an experienced legal professional, possessed a keen insight into family law and the complexities of high-stakes negotiations. They crafted a plan that positioned Ben advantageously, safeguarding his financial investments and the assets he had accumulated. Trevor's strategy was systematic and deliberate, underscoring Ben's position as the main provider during their marriage and pointing out Kathy's restricted financial autonomy stemming from her part-time employment. Kathy, conversely, found herself with limited choices. Her modest earnings from a part-time job provided scant influence in the settlement. Trevor had skillfully highlighted her financial dependence, and as a result, Kathy's efforts to negotiate a better division swiftly unraveled. She envisioned negotiating a more significant portion of their assets, yet lacking a solid income or career opportunities to support her assertions. Her requests faced opposition. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Kathy started to sense the weight of the pressure increasing. Without a career to rely on and just sporadic part-time jobs to sustain her, she felt trapped by the harsh truth of her circumstances. The escalating legal expenses and the looming possibility of facing financial instability post-divorce sharply contrasted with the sense of security she had previously assumed was hers to keep. Desperation infiltrated her efforts to reach an agreement. Yet, whenever she attempted to assert her needs, Trevor countered with persuasive reasoning that maintained the tension in the conversation. Ultimately, Kathy found herself compelled to agree to a settlement that yielded far less than her initial aspirations. Ben had liberated himself from the stifling pressure and deceit of his marriage. Yet the sorrow of what once was still hung in the air. Kathy, on the other hand, was determined not to surrender. She made multiple attempts to revive the connection they once shared. Yet Ben stood firm in his decision. He conveyed with a soft yet resolute tone that their relationship had reached its end. As time passed, her efforts diminished, and ultimately, she slipped away from his existence. Months later, as Ben stood in line at the grocery store, an unexpected voice caught his attention. As he turned, his gaze landed on Maria, a colleague of Kathy from her part-time job. They offered courteous hellos and started conversing about the familiar subjects, careers, daily experiences, and the climate. Yet, in a seemingly casual manner, Maria uttered a phrase that caused Ben's heart to race. "Work has been quite chaotic in Kathy's absence," she remarked. To be truthful, her reliability was questionable even when she was present, frequently feigning illness or taking unexpected leave. Ben's brows knitted together in curiosity. Could you clarify what you mean by that? Maria paused, her eyes darting about as if uncertain whether to proceed. Well, she started, her voice becoming softer. I hesitate to speak up. But Kathy had a tendency to be quite unreliable. She would often take days off with little warning. And there was this fellow. She brought him up several times, and I felt that their relationship was deeper than mere friendship. Ben felt a knot form in his stomach as the truth dawned on him. Are you suggesting that she was unfaithful? Maria nodded, her discomfort evident. Initially, I had my doubts, but now I believe she did. She never explicitly stated it, yet it was quite evident. I held back my thoughts earlier. Your marriage had already reached a point that was, shall we say, less than ideal. Ben stood still, his thoughts swirling as the pieces began to align. The space between us, the frustration, the peculiar actions, everything clicked into place at last. Kathy had been leading a secret existence, and he had remained unaware, missing all the clues. Thank you, Maria, he replied, his tone steady yet weary. Thank you for sharing that with me. As Ben exited the store, a storm of feelings surged within him. Fury, treachery, and, oddly enough, a sense of liberation. For months, he had questioned his choices, pondering whether he had acted hastily in bringing the marriage to a close. Yet now, he possessed the truth. Kathy had undermined their relationship long before he reached his conclusion. The pain of betrayal cut deep, yet it also offered a feeling of resolution. He was justified in choosing to walk away. He had taken the essential steps to reclaim his existence and forge ahead. A month later, I discovered that Kathy had started living with a man named Roger. To be honest, it didn't matter to me. Indeed, I experienced an unusual feeling of relief. After all that had transpired, her decisions no longer surprised me. She embraced her existence, while I found the liberation to embrace my own. That was the only thing of importance at this moment. I encountered a new individual as well. She goes by the name Lisa. She stands apart from Kathy in countless ways. Genuine and sincere, offering kindness freely and openly. With Lisa, everything seemed to flow naturally. There were no contests, no suspense. We were free to be our true selves. Her presence brought laughter back into my life, a feeling I hadn't recognized as absent until it returned so effortlessly. I recall the moment I found myself truly smiling for the first time since the divorce. We found ourselves on her couch, engrossed in a lighthearted rom-com that I would have never chosen to watch with Kathy. Yet Lisa remained indifferent. She simply sought enjoyment, and we certainly found it. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, I felt a sense of lightness. The past was not something I was overlooking. It had always existed, yet I found myself no longer confined by it. I found myself at ease, no longer preoccupied with thoughts of Kathy or the reasons behind the unfolding events. I had moved past the doubts that once clouded my mind. I was merely existing. Esteemed listeners, we invite you to express your thoughts in the comments section below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected.